Tonight on Insights on PBS Hawai'i. As the 2012 campaign season ramps up during the remaining days in the general election, our spotlight is on the race for Honolulu Prosecuting Attorney. Incumbent City Prosecutor Keith Kaneshiro faces off against his opponent, Deputy Attorney General Kevin Takata, to address your questions to the candidates. Now, live in our studio, our host, Dan Boylan.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawai'i. I'm Dan Boylan. Honolulu's prosecuting attorney oversees an annual budget of $21 million, 100 deputy prosecutors, and 200 support staff. The department is divided into 6 divisions and conducts nearly all of the state's prosecutions on Oahu, everything from traffic cases to murders. The incumbent prosecutor is Keith Kaneshiro, who is seeking re-election. He is being challenged by a former deputy prosecutor, Kevin Takata, one of the 11 deputies that Mr. Kaneshiro didn't reappoint when he assumed office 2 years ago. You can join our discussion by calling, emailing, or tweeting your questions and comments for the candidates. The contact information you now see on your screen will be repeated throughout the program. We also want to remind you that Insights is live on both your television and computer screens. It's streaming on our website right now at pbshawaii.org. This program will also be posted online. Now to the candidates for Honolulu Prosecuting Attorney. I'll get that right. Keith Kaneshiro won the special election in 2010 to fill the remaining 2 years left vacant by Peter Carlisle's decision to run for mayor. Keith now seeks a full 4-year term. He previously served 2 terms as prosecuting attorney of Honolulu from 1988 to 1996. He has also served as the director of public safety. For the last 2 years, Kevin Takata has served as a state deputy attorney general, where his responsibilities include leading the Hawaii Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. Kevin also worked for 23 years as Honolulu deputy prosecutor, where he specialized in homicide cases, and for 10 years was the chief of the trials division. I think one of the things that strikes me is that in the eyes of most people, we're a pretty safe city.
Yes.
Why does it make any difference which one of you becomes city prosecutor? We're a safe city, aren't we? What's this job all about?
Well,
it makes a difference.
It makes a difference because there are some problems that we need to address that has not been addressed. We still have a major drug abuse problem in the city. We still have, now we have a rising crime with elder abuse that needs to be addressed. And of course, we need to address animal cruelty. We've seen a lot of animal cruelty cases. In fact, just today, if you looked at the news, you saw about the puppies that was thrown in the trash. So we still have some problems that we have to address. Honolulu is a safe city, but we can make it safer.
Kevin?
That's why I'm running. We are safe, but we should and we could be safer. And the reason why we should and could be safer is the reason I'm running. Since Mr. Kaneshiro took over in less than 2 years, over 50 deputies are no longer in the office. And because of that loss, that jeopardizes our safety, and that's reflected in one stat. That's the domestic violence abuse cases. In that area, since the incumbent took office, over about 50% of the cases are either acquittals or dismissals. They are winning less than 1/3 of those cases. That needs to be changed.
I think you'll probably want to respond to that.
Yeah, when he says 50% are acquittals, I assume in the 50% are convictions, the other 50%. And I think that's a pretty good rate considering the dynamics of domestic violence. In domestic violence cases, about 80% of the victims will recant. When I say recant, they'll take back the initial statement about themselves being harmed. As a result of that, we need to address the victims. That's why we initiated a program called the Family Justice Center, which includes a long-term transitional housing for domestic violence victims. What you do is you take the victims out of the environment of violence and you put them in this long-term transitional housing. You give them job training so they can become independent, and then they don't have to go back to the violent environment. Thus, they won't recant. They'll have the job. They don't have to be dependent on their abusing spouse. So we try to address the problem in domestic violence. But like I say, it's difficult cases.
Domestic violence has been with us for a long, long time. And the prevention of domestic violence has got to take forms outside of the prosecutor office. Am I not correct? I mean,
well, a lot of the cause of domestic violence is drug abuse. And that's why we need to address the drug abuse problems. If you look at all these problems, they're interconnected. And what you have to do is you address the drug abuse problem, you get treatment to offenders, the drug offenders. And this is why I brought drug court to Hawaii, so they can get treatment instead of being incarcerated. But for the dealers and for the suppliers, you have to go and prosecute them, which is what we've done. And what we've done is focus on the source of the ingredients of ice, which is outside this country, outside our state and outside the country. And that's why I work a lot with international prosecutors to address the source of ice.
But Kevin, you're implying that it's all got to do with a turnover in the staffing of the office.
Yes, you cannot be satisfied with winning less than 1/3 of your cases. The other convictions that they get are for less severe offenses. So we cannot have leadership that is satisfied with that type of win-loss ratio. And I think it's in part due to the turnover and the lack of training. And that needs to be stopped. Deputies need to be retained. Good deputies should be attracted to the office, and they should be properly trained. And in the training area, I train not only locally, I've trained prosecutors nationally at the National Advocacy Center, which was a national training ground for prosecutors across America. And now I train prosecutors internationally. In June, I was among a handful of prosecutors invited from across America to train prosecutors from Mexico and bring the rule of law to that country that's torn by violence. This is a historic effort, and I think that's a reflection on my ability to train, and I can bring that back to the office.
So you're arguing that someone listening tonight who hasn't cast their ballot yet should vote for you because you're going to train prosecutors better and hold them better.
Yes, and not only train them better, but also to ensure that we have ethical prosecution. One of the reasons that some left is they were told not to turn over discovery to the defense that hurts the prosecutor's case. Some of this evidence consists of what we call inconsistent statements. For example, in the domestic violence area, that's where a victim may say, I was assaulted on Monday, and later say I was assaulted on Friday. Now, the prosecutor is ethically obligated to turn over things that help and hurt its case to the defense. Those that were told not to turn over inconsistent statements, they were in a quandary. If they abided by that directive, they jeopardized their license to practice law. And if they didn't know what was going to happen, so instead they left. So we have to make sure that our prosecutors understand what their ethical obligations are and follow them. That is so important in this office.
It's interesting you talk about ethical prosecution, because after I did not appoint him, I guess he was upset, so he filed an ethics complaint with the Office of Disciplinary Counsel. They investigated his allegations, his charges, and they came up with a finding in December of last year saying that they found no evidence to support his charges, and his complaint was dismissed. Now, the other checks and balance, if we are not turning over the discovery or what's supposed to be the evidence that we should be turning over, the defense attorneys are there. They can file motions, and also the ODC is there. You can file a complaint. We have not had any case reversed because of not turning over evidence. We have not had any motions granted because we have not turned over any evidence. So that's all I guess a red herring as far as ethical prosecution.
What do you do with the idea that there's such a big turnover? I mean, you didn't rehire 11 of them, as I understand it, and then others left to the count of 50 or so. That out of 100, that's pretty high, isn't it?
No, it's whenever you have a change in administration, you have a change in management. And people who are used to the same type of management for 14 years, they get accustomed to that. what I found was a probation officer seeing 5 deputy prosecutors coming out of the movie theater at 2:30 in the afternoon, and to me that was not acceptable. We find prosecutors who are making $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year coming to work at 9:30, leaving at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That was not acceptable. So what we did was we imposed supervision. They have to be supervised. They have to be in the office. They have to work the hours that they're supposed to work. And some deputies did not like that. Now, I'm not saying all the deputies who left were in that category. Some deputies retired, some deputies left the jurisdiction, so that happens. But the deputies who were not happy with my supervision left. They did not want to be held accountable.
Shouldn't the prosecuting attorney have a right to get rid of people who he feels are not, and have people come at a certain time to work?
Sure, but let me address one other thing first, okay? The claim that because the ethics complaint was dismissed, that it didn't happen, that the incumbent did not tell people not to turn over inconsistent statements, is belied by an interview he gave to the Hawai'i Reporter in July of last year, July 12th to be specific. In that interview, Mr. Kaneshiro told the reporter, admits that he told 2 deputy prosecutors not to turn over inconsistent statements. Okay, that's my reply to that response. Second, as to the deputies leaving, I think we have to be concerned about the changing reasons that have been proffered to explain this exodus. It began with they didn't want to go to trial, they wanted to plea bargain cases. Then it went to bad morale, and those with bad morale left. Then it went to Saturday training. They didn't want to attend Saturday training, although many worked on Saturdays. And I understand that if you were a member of the office softball team, you could leave early. Now, regarding office hours, my understanding is that there are deputies under investigation for violating office hours, but I also understand that they were hired by Mr. Kaneshiro. And now we have the explanation is because some were seen at the movies. Now, the rationale keeps evolving and changing, and that causes me concern.
Well, let me clear this up. All the reasons that he mentioned about the deputies not being there and my reasons why the deputies left, all of them are true, every one of them. The thing is, when you get to talk before a neighborhood board, you only get about 2 minutes. You only can address one of the issues. So I don't have time to enumerate all the different reasons why the deputies did not like my management style and why we had to closely supervise the deputies. And therefore, like, if he wants to know what reasons, all of them are true.
But you know, from the point of view of somebody outside of the office, it sometimes seems to me that we come to these elections watching, but who has sat at this table at various elections for prosecutor, that we deal with the office politics of the prosecutor's office. Kaneshiro's coming back to run when it opens up when Carlisle's gone. He ran against Carlisle once and lost. Carlisle was a Marsland guy. You beat Marsland back in whenever it was, 88, right? So it's sort of the Marsland guys and the Carlisle, and then you're a friend, if I'm not mistaken, of Picaro, right? I'm sorry if I got the name wrong, who ran
Don Picaro, yes.
Right. So you're of that faction in the office or something. I'm sorry. I know I may not be being fair here, but it seems to me that sometimes you guys have different styles as an office, or that the whole office has had, that seems to change back. This is like Fossey and Ariyoshi over the years.
Dan, you bring out a good point, and this is what I intend to do. What has to be changed is the attitude of the prosecutor. You shouldn't be demanding loyalty from your deputies and staff to yourself. You should ask and look for deputies and staff that are loyal to the office and, more importantly, to the cause of justice. Because the guy who is elected to the prosecutor's office, he or she is going to change. But we cannot have house cleaning, treating deputies and staff poorly so they leave, simply so you can retain your loyalists. Again, the prosecutor should be looking for people who are loyal to the office and, more specifically, the cause of justice, because that is the primary responsibility of the prosecutor, to ensure public safety, and in doing so, to make sure that justice is done.
Well, yeah, I've never asked prosecutors to be loyal to me. In fact, If you recall, after I beat Don Pacaro in the election, I retained him. I appointed him as a deputy prosecutor in his same position, his same pay, even though I ran against him. So it had nothing to do with loyalty. Loyalty to the office. The people who left the office, they left voluntarily. They are not loyal to the office. What is important is the prosecutors who are in the office now are very skilled, they're hardworking, and they're dedicated prosecutors. And those are the people we should be concerned about, not the people who left the office. And all this talk about office politics is menial. We're talking about an election. We're talking about public safety. We have to address the issues of what's going to make our community a safer community. We're not doing that. We've been here all this time. We haven't even addressed those issues
What
yet.
will make it a safer community?
Well, we need to address the drug abuse problem, which I have done, which we have to get drug treatment, and I have brought in drug court. And what I also did was the past legislative session, I got additional funding for drug court, for drug offenders. We have a nuisance abatement team that has never used, the prosecutor's office never used the nuisance abatement law to shut down drug houses. We have a team now that's doing that. We had an
How do you do that? Like if there's too much traffic at a house and there's
you document it, and you get the witnesses to write statements, and then you go in a civil proceeding to do a nuisance abatement action. You address that. You know, when I got there, elder abuse was never focused on. We see a rise in elder abuse, so I doubled the size of the elder abuse unit. We went out and we trained. We trained the financial institutions on financial exploitation of elders. We also went to senior citizens groups to talk to them about elder abuse, to be aware of. So we addressed it. We focused on those problems. Animal cruelty was never looked at the prosecutor's office seriously. And if you understand, if you remember, we shut down a puppy mill. 153 dogs rescued from this puppy mill, and we pursued the prosecution. These are programs that you need to look at. What programs is a prosecuting attorney going to do to make the community safer?
Keith, we've got some barking dogs in my community. I'd like to be abusive too, but that's another issue. So what are the issues we should be talking about? You will contend we should still be talking about this one, I'm sure. But.
Right, we have to look at the deputies in the office and whether they're at a talent and skill level to win cases. That's the essence of the office. Police investigate crimes and they make arrests. But unless you have the deputies who are there, who are experienced and can win cases, all that work is for naught. So again, I emphasize that, and I will continue to emphasize that. And I think any good leader realizes that the most important resource in any organization is your people. And to wholeheartedly dismiss and say that the 50 who left were really no good, I think is a disservice to them. I never said
the 50 left were no good, because there's some good friends of mine who
not
moved
finished
to
with
office.
And regarding the drug problem, I find it ironic that Mr. Kaneshiro talks about that when less than a year before he took office, he represented a major drug dealer who was caught with over 2.5 pounds of meth. And what happened was he didn't move to suppress the drugs. What he did was to recover the money, jewelry, and Rolex watches seized from that person. He was privately retained. So how was he being paid? I mean, you can't say something and do something different.
Well, let me say this. I was a defense attorney. As a defense attorney, I have an ethical obligation to work in the best interest of my client. My client's family came and hired me to defend him. I defended him to the best of my ability. I gave him the best interest. In defending him, I was able to get a deal from the prosecutor's office. This guy was charged, my client was charged with trafficking methamphetamine, which is a mandatory 20 years, Class A felony. The prosecutor's office gave me a deal to drop it to a Class B felony and to ask for not less than 18 months incarceration minimum. So they gave me that deal, so I got the best deal I could for my client. Now, Kevin Takata, who represented the state of Hawaii, went into a hearing where 5, convicted murderers, they were convicted of murder in prison. They were by a jury of 12. They were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The Supreme Court affirmed the decision. Kevin Takata handled the case for the state, our office. And what he did was he agreed with the defense attorney that there was not evidence. As a result of his agreement, 2 defendants were set free from prison. And within 1 year, 1 defendant was set free from prison. He was killed in an attempted robbery. The second defendant, who was released from prison, was killed at the Plea golf course shooting. And they were continuing their life in crime. And Kevin was directly responsible for that.
Keith, let's get the whole truth out here now, okay?
That's the whole
I
truth.
didn't handle the trial. What happened then was the defense attorney called me up and explained the situation. They had filed an appeal. There was a mix-up in paperwork. This was years after it happened. Due to that mix-up, this defendant could have just walked scot-free out the door and fled the jurisdiction, but he didn't. He stayed there because his attorney said, let's fight this through the system. Let's do it right because they're going to catch the mix-up in paperwork. So he called me up and told me this. So that intrigued me. Now, I had a lot of work. I could have just let that case sit on the file cabinet, gather dust, and the guy would just sit in jail. And I looked at it further, and I realized there was a lack of evidence to convict him. But why was he convicted? Because he had a new attorney who did a poor job. But he didn't want to raise that issue on appeal because he liked his attorney. So his attorney asked me, Kevin, we would like to apply to the governor for pardon. May we use your name? I thought, well, I'm not sure what good it'll do, but go ahead, because I looked it over. Again, the easy thing for me to have done was to do nothing. And Mr. Kaneshiro misses the point that the job of the prosecutor is not just to get convictions, but to make sure justice is done. I have the most homicide convictions in Hawaii. I didn't do that by being light on crime.
He went to the parole board and told the parole board that they were innocent, that there was no sufficient evidence. And you remember the key thing, what he said? He didn't do the trial? That's exactly correct. He did not do the trial, so how can he know that these guys are innocent?
By looking at the record.
I have heard criticisms of, and I've felt it listening to prosecutors over the years from, I don't think Marsden was ever at this table. Maybe he was, or whatever we had at the time. But the idea that a prosecutor's office is a conviction mill. We should get out as many convictions as possible. And in most cases, that go to court, aren't they not settled by conviction, or they're usually settled before you get to court, right? Or in the middle? I've been on a jury once and they let us go in about 3 hours because some settlement had taken place.
You bring up another good area of discussion, and that's plea bargains. Nationwide, over 90% of cases are plea bargained at the federal, state, and local level. This is a necessary part of the office because it's a volume operation. When I was trials division chief, we were getting at least 50 felonies in a week. If you don't dispose of 50 in 1 week, they stack up. And what happens is when they stack up at court, they wait too long, they sit there too long, and judges are obligated to dismiss the cases because the defendant's right to speedy trial is violated. Now, right now, the prosecutor's plea bargaining policy, I believe, is upside down. They're lax on the serious cases and tough on the minor cases. For example, Mr. Kaneshiro talks about being tough on elder abuse. He took a case where a 97-year-old lady burned to death in her house. The charge was manslaughter. He could have gone to trial and sought life with parole, but they dealt it out, and his minimum is 11 years. Now, that's not being tough on elder abuse. In another case, a guy fires 2 shots into another car on the freeway following a road rage incident. He was looking at mandatory incarceration. They dismissed the charge, they fixed another one, so he got probation. That's not the type of cases to plea bargain in. And yet they're tough on a puppy mill case and on a misdemeanor. They're holding a defendant for $200,000 bail.
Okay, well, he's the one talking about plea bargain. His case that he's talk about, what's the guy's name, Kawakami, the guy who chopped up his parents. Kevin Takata plea bargained that case. He was charged with murder in the first degree, which is life in prison without the possibility of parole. But Kevin went the easy way. He got him to plead guilty to murder in the second degree, which is life with possibility of parole. Now, the case that I handled, in which the elderly woman was burned, the defendant agreed to a 35-year sentence. He mentions the minimum, but he doesn't mention the maximum sentence. 35 years sentence, plus we can go to the parole board and ask for a high minimum. The defense cannot ask for anything less than 12 years. So, of course, you can't try all the case, but these are the kind of plea bargain we got. Another plea bargain case we got, his campaign manager, if you recall, did a trial, convicted someone of murder, but because he was unethical, the Supreme Court reversed the conviction for prosecutorial misconduct. Now, that's his campaign chairman doing that. Came back to our office, we had to try the case. Our prosecutor got the defendant to plead guilty to murder. Plead guilty, we don't even have to go to trial. Plead guilty to murder as charged, and he would get a 30-year sentence.
I have always wanted to be a judge. I really have, and I think I would look good in robes. But with all due respect, we can't retry all of these cases. So,
well, let me respond to his
very
claim.
quickly on this. I'll move to something else. But go ahead.
On the Kawakami case, what Mr. Kaneshiro forgets to mention, I got a minimum of 225 years. He's not coming out. As to Don Pacaro's case, there's a lot of controversy about that claim of prosecutorial misconduct, and there was an agreement on that. So I'd like to just set the record.
The Supreme Court is wrong?
I just like to set the record straight.
The Supreme Court is the one who made the finding. Prosecutorial misconduct. This is the Hawaii Supreme Court. Here he is. All of a sudden, he decides a guy is convicted of murder, but no, even the jury convicted him. No, he looked at the transcript and he will decide that the guy was innocent. And Don Pacaro, his campaign chairman, got a case reversed for prosecutorial misconduct, and he said, well, the Supreme Court didn't know what they were talking about.
So the criticism against Pacaro falls on me, but yet in today's Hawaii Reporter, it's been noted that you received donations from a convicted felon, Walter Kitagawa.
We need to move
you
on
received
to discuss
$4,000.
Here's one from Nancy in Kapolei, an issue. Where there are too many people, this person is saying, Nancy in Kapolei says, there are too many people who are frequent flyers in the system, drug users who go in and out of the drug court. How will new laws prevent this, and should we send them to jail? Yes. Are there new laws about the drug court?
No, you can send them to jail with the current law. If they violate the conditions of drug court, they can be sentenced to prison.
But Nancy seems to imply that that's not happening enough.
Well, that's the judges who control drug court. They're the ones who have the final decisions. If especially like drug court or probation, when they violate the conditions, we ask for incarceration.
Dan, in those cases, those frequent flyers are what we call repeat offenders or career criminals. They're looking at mandatory incarceration with mandatory minimum jail time. So I don't know what the office is doing with those cases now.
Terry says, my son was a victim of murder. The prosecutor chose not to prosecute even though they knew who did it. How many outstanding murder cases are there that you have chosen not to prosecute? Yeah, I see that on TV all the time, that somehow they've got a case, but they don't know they can't quite make it. They don't feel they can make the case. How often does that happen in real life?
I can't answer that question because I'm not in the office. I don't know how many cases are sitting there uncharged.
Yeah, so he shouldn't be making allegations about cases not being charged. Let me say this, that we look at the evidence. Our decision to charge is based on the evidence. If there's no evidence to support, we cannot charge.
If there's not
there have to be evidence to support the charges. And if after investigation there's no evidence, we can't charge.
Someone in Makiki wants to know from both candidates, will they actively participate in cases just like Carlisle? Will you actively participate just like Carlisle?
Yes, I've been a trial attorney my entire career. I didn't just sit in the office and be an administrator.
Well, wait a minute. Kevin, you said just an administrator. It seems to me that with 21 million, 100 deputies who have to be trained, as you pointed out, 200 staff, that the administration job's a big job, isn't it?
It is, but you can do both. And prosecutors want to follow the lead prosecutor who is actually doing cases. Now, the claim may be that the elected prosecutor has to be more than a trial attorney. Yes, but you have to be a trial attorney in an office of trial attorneys, and you have to lead by example. You have to be out front in court doing things.
Well, was Carlisle the model you'd want to have?
No, he's not, because he went to trial a lot. He neglected the office. And let me give you an example. You know, I've gone to trial. I don't have to prove myself. I don't have to prove that I can do trials. I've done over 20 murder trials in my career, so I don't have to go to court to prove that I can do trials. Now, what's important is you have to get that office running, and you have to get funding for that office. The legislature, state legislature, when I left that office back in 1996, 12 deputy prosecutors were funded by the state legislature, 9 victim witness counselors. When I came back, there were 0 deputy prosecutors funded by the state, 0 victim witness counselors. And the reason why is because the prosecuting attorney did not go to the legislature to ask. I went last session, we got 5 deputies funded by the legislature, 4 victim witness counselors. I got an additional 5 victim witness counselors in the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, so 9 victim witness counselors. So you have to go to the legislature, you have to ask for funding for the office. I went to City Council. In going to City Council, we got funding for the Family Justice Center, $2.3 million to run that operation. So you have to go out there. You cannot just stay in the office. The office is not just about processing cases. Anybody can process cases. It's about working with the community. It's about being the voice of public safety. You have to go out there. You have to work with organizations. You have to work with the Humane Society to develop cases. Now, he made light of the puppy mill case. You know, the puppy mill case is very important. It's very important. Animal cruelty cases are very important, and the reason why is because people who are cruel to animals are usually cruel to other people. There's a study done by the FBI that when they looked at all the serial killers and mass murders, they all started as animal cruelty. They were cruel to animals. So it's proven. So, you know, to make light of animal cruelty case, I don't take that.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make light. I make light of everything. That's one of my weaknesses.
I wasn't making light of animal cruelty cases.
But would you deny, excuse me, but would you deny Keith's point that there are important a part of this job is working with the legislature and being the face of the prosecutor's office? And
oh, yes, and I'm able to work with other agencies. I work well with police. I work well with courts. I can work well with the legislature if just given the opportunity. I work well with people in general, and I think that's indicated by my broad base of support. Our campaign has attracted liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans, people of all walks of life. And I think that's a reflection of what we can bring to the office if given the opportunity.
You know, Dan, action speaks louder than words. It's easy to say, I can work with them, I can work. When is Kevin? Has he proven? Has he gone to legislature? Has he worked with city council? Has he done all of this? I have done all of this. He has not. So when they say I'm running for office, it's proven leadership. It's proven. I've done it. I'm not saying I'm going to do it. I've did all these things. Kevin has not done any of these things.
Give me the opportunity and I will.
what would each of you do about the growing crime of agricultural theft, both crops and equipment? How will you use the new agricultural theft law? This is Mike in Manoa, who is a beekeeper.
That's a very good question, and those are very difficult cases because we generally don't have witnesses. Someone who actually sees what happens or can identify crops, because crops often, well, you can't identify some vegetables from another. And I think it's going to require cooperation by farmers to look out for each other, but also for the community to look out for the farmers and help them in that respect. Without the sufficient evidence, those cases cannot be successfully prosecuted.
I wouldn't investigate this bee case. If there were a bee case, I'd stay away from it.
You know, Kevin said he would. I have already. I've met with the Director of Agriculture. I met with the Attorney General's office because I guess we're looking at coordination, who's to do this. We met with the companies that were involved that had their crops stolen. In fact, the prosecutor's office, when Kevin was there, prosecuted a guy for defending his crops. Somebody came in and tried to steal, and the guy shot him. They prosecuted him for attempted murder. So when he says, he's going to help them, how that office helped him was to prosecute the guy who's defending his own crops.
Someone asked about a carry law, since you brought up guns. Someone wants to know, would you support a carry law in Hawaii that would allow individuals to carry a weapon?
No, I would not. I would not.
I don't either.
On the grounds that, I mean, it's become a big thing on the mainland, right? It's spread.
No, our gun laws are strong enough. We have good law enforcement out there. We don't want people taking the law into their own hands. This is a process we have to go through. And all we need is for someone to pull a gun and shoot some innocent person because of a mistake, someone who hasn't been trained carrying a gun. So I wouldn't support that.
Our gun violence is really very low. What we have are very good laws that restrict who can carry guns and who can possess guns, when they can possess them, and what type of guns that they can have. Those laws are working, so I wouldn't change them.
A couple of people ask about the Family Justice Center, which I don't quite understand, and saying that it has funds, but why is it has received funding, but it's still not in place. Is that correct?
Yes.
It was started by Mr. Carlisle. As to why it's not in place, you're going to have to ask the incumbent.
Keith, why is it not in place?
Well, it wasn't started by Mr. Carlisle. There was a grant gotten under his administration. They got a federal grant. And when I got to that office, they were in a process of meeting to decide who would be the director of the Family Justice Center. The Family Justice Center is a concept where you consolidate all the services for domestic violence victims at one location. And there was going on, and nothing was being accomplished. Well, what we did was we added a component, which is a long-term transitional housing to the Family Justice Center. In addition to having a consolidation of services, you would have long-term transitional housing for the victims to live there. We went to the city council and we got a funding of $2.3 million to fund that. The process right now is Corp Council is looking at the legal aspect to make sure we do the right, procurement and how we go and get the services. We have been talking to some nonprofits for the services to provide the long-term transitional housing, but it's in a process right now.
Kevin, someone said, Susan is saying, I agree with Kevin. I'm not sure. Oh, the American system is about justice. We don't want innocent people to serve time. But if you let people out of jail who then end up very shortly involved in a shootout somewhere, and you have to be very, very careful about this, yeah?
Yes. But what happened after does not speak to what evidence was there to convict him wrongly. And that's what I looked at. Because again, Dan, the easy thing for me to have done was to do nothing. I could have just let that case sit there, but I didn't. I created more work for myself. But again, I think my record is reflected in the number of homicide convictions I have. I'm not known for being lenient on crime.
Even that, we don't know how many homicide convictions. He said he has the record of homicide convictions. I don't know that for a fact. I looked in the past 10 years, the last 10 years he was at the prosecutor's office, he handled 7 murder cases. Of that, 1 was acquitted and 2 pled to a lesser, was found guilty of a lesser offense. So I don't know about this record number of homicide convictions that he had. I mean,
Keith, I can give you the list if you want it.
Well, I think that's what we need to do, because you keep on saying that, because
I've been a prosecutor for over 23
you were the
years.
director of the largest unit, but you were removed from that, being a supervisor in 2006, and you left office in 2010. So in 2006, you were replaced as the supervisor for the trials division. And you said you were the commander of the internet crimes at the AG's office. You've been there for 2 years. What have you done in the AG's office? And we found that you were removed as a commander and replaced with an investigator. You are not the commander. You currently are not the commander. So you keep on saying all these things, which is not true.
Keith, you know those allegations are not true, and yet you tell them.
Well, I talked to the Attorney General. That's what he told me.
Let me tell you what happened. First, in the trials division chief, I stepped down voluntarily. There's a room full of people that can attest to that. I did that in about the same time, I think it was 2006. And the reason I did it, my friend Don Picaro was planning to run for office. So we decided that, Don, look, what you need is administrative experience. This is the largest division. If I step down, you can get that experience. As to the internet crimes against children, they thought it was better to have an investigator supervising investigators. Also, that freed me up to handle other cases. I was being more an administrator of a grant. That's the situation. You know it, but you're disregarding the truth.
Well, the public don't know it because that's not what you're telling the public. You tell the public you're the commander of the Internet Task Force. You tell the public that you're supervisor for this big unit of your so-called 30 deputies. I supervised 100 deputies for over 10 years, for 10 years. And you make a claim, I supervise the largest.
Here's a question from Deacon Ken out in Aiea. How will you address human trafficking, especially minors? How will you prosecute? Have you had any experience with this?
Not in the actual prosecution, but I am familiar with the problem. And the problem is that the public and even law enforcement is not aware of the problem. We first have to begin an educational campaign. The same way that was done with drunken driving and domestic violence. So people understand that this is a crime. Next, we have to properly train investigators to be able to look into these cases. From what I learned when I put on some training is that often these girls are being sold over the internet. Investigators need to know that, know what sites to go to, and how to develop a case. Then we can prosecute those defendants. We also have to encourage victims to come forward. And in order to do that, we have to provide them with the assurance that they are not going to be re-victimized. The defendant is not going to be able to go after them. It's that type of intimidation that prevents girls from coming forward and reporting these crimes.
Do we really think there is human well, I'm sorry. Do you want to respond?
Let me tell you what I did. When I got to the office, I was approached by human trafficking people, and I recognized there probably was a need to look at addressing a problem. So what they wanted to do was put in a human trafficking law, which the prosecutor's office, and any attempts that they want in trying to change the law, the prosecutor's office at that time resisted and testified against. What I did was I sat down and listened to the concerns, especially when you said minors. So what we propose is upgrading the offense called promoting prostitution in the first degree, which includes if you have minors in prostitution. It's now, we made it from a Class B to a Class A felony, which is mandatory 20 years. We increased the penalties. And when we did that, we also addressed prostitute that was used in coercion. What we targeted was the people who would benefit or profit from prostitution. We got the law passed in the legislature. In addition to that law, we also included the victims of human trafficking as witnesses that would be entitled to witness protection under the state law. The state law enumerates what kind of witnesses get witness protection. We included victims of human trafficking in that category. So we've established the law, we put the law in place to provide for the prosecution of human trafficking.
If I'm not mistaken, the only human trafficking case that we've had has been with agricultural workers, isn't it?
That's my understanding.
In the federal.
In the federal.
And we have done human trafficking in the prosecutor's office, not on the human trafficking law or promoting prostitution. We did it on a kidnapping or terroristic threatening.
I'd ask you about this one. Someone wants to know how many of the cases that come to the prosecutor's office involve mental illness, and how do you deal with them? I was thinking, I think you dealt with the case of the fellow who shot up the copy company, killed 7
Byron
people.
Usugi.
Yeah,
That's a good question. I can't answer
What do you
it.
do in a case like that? I mean, the guy was obviously crazy, but I mean, he goes to jail, right? And should he go to jail?
In that case, he should have gone to jail, and he did. People have to understand that simply because someone has a mental problem does not mean they're legally insane. As to the number of insanity cases that come into the prosecutor's office, I don't know because of my focus on homicides. But I can tell you nationwide, the rate at which the insanity defense is raised is very low. I think it's under 5%. In Hawaii, it's higher. And I believe why the rate is higher is in part due to the fact that court-appointed examiners, they're trained in the area of psychology and psychiatry. Insanity is not a diagnosis. That's a legal defense. So we need to educate these court-appointed examiners about what insanity is and what it isn't. So when they provide opinions regarding whether someone is insane, they know the law as well as the mental problems. They can put it together and make a more informed diagnosis for the court, because their opinion carries a great weight. Often the court sees, okay, 2 says he's insane, 1 says he's sane, so we're going with the 2. We can change those numbers.
You know, I was doing some math, and it seems to me that you came to the prosecutor's office as the head prosecutor in, well, anyway, you guys had about 10 years where you overlapped, right?
8.
8 years where you overlapped. You were prosecutor, you were a deputy prosecutor. You worked together. Must have gotten along okay, right? Right?
Yeah, we got along. I kept him in the office. I appointed him in my 2 terms. I put him as a deputy.
I was more than a deputy. I was on the homicide team for 7 of those 8 years.
Well, he was on the homicide team because I put him on a homicide team.
But my question is, obviously at one time you had a collegial and an appreciative relationship of one another. You appointed, you served, whatever, you got along, you didn't fire him. You were there. Where did you part company, philosophically or what, however? And more important, I sometimes wonder when I do these things, and I look at both of you, who seem to me like competent, intelligent guys, and I've known you longer than I've known you, but don't you ever leave these common meetings and sometimes say, maybe I've been unfair to Keith, or maybe I've been unfair to Kevin? Aren't there things that both of you have to offer to this office that you would acknowledge? Now, I know I've asked a long question there. You want to start?
Sure, Dan.
Okay.
What motivates me to run is the way the office is being mismanaged. And again, I go back to the deputies leaving. Our community cannot afford to have this continue. And that's what's motivated me to run. If that wasn't happening, I wouldn't be here.
But you worked with him for 8 years. Did you think he was a bad prosecutor then?
I take the 5th on that.
You're going to take the 5th. I knew I couldn't get some agreement here. Why did I even try?
Let me tell you what happened. When he took the position and allowed his 2 inmates to go free, I was approached by the detective who had investigated the case, who was an employee in our office. And I was approached by other deputies who told me that he was insubordinate, Kevin was insubordinate, I should fire him. Because this was early in his career, I decided not to fire him. I told them, you know what, he's young, he needs to learn. He made a mistake, but he needs to learn. And I'm not going to ruin his career by firing him, get rid of him. Now, after years went by and I was in private practice, when I came back to the office, his attitude did not change. And that's why I did not appoint him, because he felt that he knew it all, and whatever he did was right, and he would not listen to anybody else. I couldn't have someone like that in the office.
Dan, if you believe that story, first, we had very little contact during the years he was out of the office, so he knows nothing about me during that period. Second, it indicates something very disturbing. It indicates that this incumbent held a grudge for over 15 years. You can't have a prosecutor who's vindictive.
I'm not going anywhere. I didn't get anywhere with that question. I was trying to be ameliorative, and I failed yet again. What is the prosecutor why is the prosecutor, I guess that's you, so hard on speeding? Why are you so hard on speeding? When are they going to release the manual on the laser gun? Glenn in Makakilo wants to know. Do you have anything to do with that?
That's the law. That we have to enforce the law. The law is speeding is against the law, and speeding endangers people's lives, and that's why we have to enforce the law.
What percentage of HPD arrests are legitimate crimes deserving of prosecution? Do you see arrests coming before you that were not legitimate and shouldn't be prosecuted?
Yes, I've seen some. In fact, if you recall, there were several stabbings. There were 2 stabbings at Mayor White's housing, and I guess the charge was supposed to be attempted murder, and in reviewing the stabbings, and also there was also another attempted stabbing at Waikiki. In reviewing those cases, there were insufficient evidence, and we decided not to charge. I mean, it's important that we charge cases, but it's also very important that we don't charge if there's no evidence to support the charge. And that's what we did in those cases.
I don't know what the percentage is, Dan, but there is a screening division whose job is to make that decision.
And Kevin has never worked there. I worked in a screening division, so I know exactly what they go through. I worked in every facet of the office. I worked in screening, I worked in trials, I worked in appellate. I went before the Supreme Court and argued cases. He hasn't done all those things.
Kevin, Kyle wants to know, how do you plan to improve the office legislatively? How do you, yeah, I guess that's the question.
One of the things I would seek that I'm interested in is to revamp the murder laws. Right now, murder 1 is reserved for certain classes of people or 2 or more killings. And the classes of people include judges, police officers, prosecutors, and witnesses. There are concerned citizens who want to know why, when their loved one is killed, they're not looking at the same penalty as those classes. What I wouldn't do is what Mr. Kaneshiro did last session, and go before the legislature and ask them to take away, basically, the right to speedy trial from a certain class of defendants. That's House Bill 1774. Defense attorneys got wind of it. It didn't go anywhere. You cannot have a prosecutor who's trying to take away constitutional rights at the legislature. That's what I won't do.
Well, Rule 48 is not a constitutional right. It's a rule created by the Supreme Court. And what the proposed legislation was in Rule 48 to exempt domestic violence cases, because we have a lot of domestic violence cases, because there's so much domestic violence cases that can't be tried within 6 months. A lot of the cases are dismissed, and we have to refile again. In the previous administration, they would not refile, they would not even charge as many cases because they wouldn't allow the victims to have their day in court. But we have taken a position that we should allow them to have the day in court. But because there's so many cases, Rule 48 allows the judges to dismiss the cases. So it was not taken away of any constitutional rights. It's a rule that was created by the Supreme Court and make an exemption only on domestic violence cases.
But I understand there is a lot of backlog. I was talking to an attorney the other day, and they said there's just a tremendous backlog of cases awaiting trial. Is that domestic violence mainly?
That's cases not only that include domestic violence, which is of this prosecutor's creation, because that problem didn't exist before, but also I understand at the felony level. And that's created a problem too, because again, when cases sit too long, they're going to be dismissed. So what good does it do the public in protecting safety by saying, I'm going to be tough on crime? You have to be smart on crime.
But it sounds to me that listening to the two of you, that somewhere, as a civilian, somewhere along the line here, a lot of this is an education in what you can do and what you can't do, namely what you can get before and finish and get through.
It's an education in the proper use of discretion. The prosecutor has a lot of discretion. If exercised wisely, this backlog should not be there. That's the simple truth.
Well, it's not only choosing cases. You have to be concerned about the community's public safety. You do cases to promote the public safety. You don't do cases for judicial expediency or to make it easier on a prosecutor's office to make less cases. You do cases because it's important for the victims to have their day in court. It's important to preserve public safety. And if you send a message that you're only going to cherry pick your cases, then the criminals will have a field day.
We have to let the incumbent have the last word. We're out of time. I'm sorry, Kevin. Yeah, you got the. I'm sorry. We're out of time, but I really enjoyed the discussion, though I have to say some of it I didn't understand. I'm sorry. I didn't get my law degree. Thank you very much for coming with us. I know you got 3 more days of campaigning. Over the past 6 months, we have devoted a lot of Insights programming to the candidates and issues of election year 2012. As you see, we saved the best for last. Next Thursday, on November 6th, Hawaii's voters will provide the ultimate insight. If you haven't voted already, please, please don't forget to go to the polls next Tuesday. Next week on Insights, just 2 days after Tuesday's general election, we'll be looking back at the results and attempting to put your votes into perspective. I'll be joined by Richard Barreca of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser, Wayne Yoshioka of Hawaii Public Radio, Chad Blair of Honolulu Civil Beat, and political scientist Neil Milner. We'll review and analyze local, state, and national races and anticipate where our new leaders will be taking us in the new year. That's next time on Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Dan Boylan. Ahui ho.